This is the Education Gadfly Show.
Welcome to the Education Gadfly Show. I'm Stephanie Disler, producer of the show. On today's episode, Mike and David are joined by Jing Liu and Seth Gershenson, authors of our latest report, Ready or Not, a new way to measure elementary and middle school quality. They'll discuss how tracking students' future GPAs could provide a clearer picture of school quality. Then, on the Research Minute, Amber examines a new study on young children's evolving media consumption habits and the role technology plays from early childhood through the classroom. All this and more on the Education Gadfly Show, starting now.
Hello, this is your host, Mike Petrilli of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, here at the Education Gadfly Show and online at fordhaminstitute.org. And now, please join me in welcoming our special guests for this week, Jing Liu and Seth Gershenson. Jing and Seth, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, welcome. We are so excited to have you here. They have done a lot of work together as a team, but most recently for a great new study published by Fordham called Ready or Not, a new way to measure elementary and middle school quality. We will talk all about that in a moment. First, let's welcome my co-host, David Griffith.
Hey, Mike. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, I hope everybody's doing okay. I missed our podcast last week. I was out with the flu. It's that time of year, I guess. I think John White had been out with the flu the week before that. So hopefully everybody's healthy, rounding the corner into the springtime here, even though Seth and I presented this report a few weeks ago in Dallas, and it was like the coldest day in Dallas in years. And I think that's why I got sick. So I blame Dallas and their not very strong standards for windows that can keep the cold out of conference hotels.
Lack of insulation.
Something like that. I don't know. I mean, you would think whatever they use to keep the heat out in the summer would maybe translate, but it really didn't. But anyway, gang, we are so excited about this new study that you released on our behalf, or that we released on your behalf, or that we all worked on together, and that is now out there in the world. We're going to talk about that today, and it's an important issue because it's about accountability. It's about something that might complement test scores. It's about how can we evaluate the effectiveness of schools. It's got it all. Let's talk about that on Ed Reform Update. All right, so y'all know David and I and the rest of us here at Fordham, we're testing hawks. We like testing. We probably like testing more than 99.999% of the country. And yet, we will also acknowledge that reading and math tests in grades 3 through 8 can't tell you everything that you might want to know about the quality of a school. So let me pitch this to you first of all, Seth. This notion that we're going to talk about today, which is a way to use grades as a measure for school effectiveness. And it gets complicated and wonky because, of course, people hear grades and they think, what about grade inflation? And what about different teacher standards? And what about all of that? But first, fundamentally, for you and Jing, why is it important for us to be looking for some measures of school quality that are not just test scores?
Yeah, so I think there's a few reasons, and they all have to do with the basic idea that tests measure a pretty narrow concept or idea of content mastery and proficiency. And we can complement that, we can add to that with a more holistic measure that captures a broader set of academic skills as well as what we might think of as socio-emotional or non-academic skills. And grades or GPAs are exactly that. Mm-hmm. They measure ability to turn in assignments on time, to complete assignments, to struggle through a challenging section or stress of the year for a student. And so they really add to the narrow slice of performance that gets captured on a one-day test.
Yeah. All right, good. And Jing, you did a great study for us, previous one, that was also looking at new indicators. Okay, it's also in the context of the Every Student Succeeds Act, States have been allowed to look for alternative indicators. They quickly landed for elementary schools on chronic absenteeism, pretty much across the board as the alternative indicator. And you came up with a way of thinking about that that was a better way than just chronic absenteeism. And remind us of that because there's a hook here. There's a commonality.
Yes. So in the study I did with Fordham a few years ago, we look at schools' contribution to student attendance. And in that particular study, we are not only looking at chronic absenteeism, but we are looking at class skipping as a whole. So the totality of missing instructional time. And for the district I work with, they have this really unique data in terms of keeping track of attendance to every single class period. So we have way more variation to use compared with only total absent days or chronic absenteeism status. So we look at school contribution to student attendance by using a value-added framework, which is kind of similar to what we use for this particular study we're discussing today. We found that schools are really influential in terms of keeping students out of school or reducing absenteeism, and that aspect of school quality also contribute to student long-run success, such as college attendance and high school graduation.
Great. Okay. And again, this is the same notion we do with test-based value added, right? But one of the things that people always say is, oh, it's so correlated with socioeconomic backgrounds. And of course, that then tends to be correlated with some of the racial achievement gaps we have in our country. And so you're just measuring the demographics of the school. And if you were just looking at raw test scores, to some degree, that is what can end up happening. But when you look at value added, you say, well, okay, let's just focus on what schools have control over, which is how much progress kids make from year to year, right? And so you're no longer penalizing schools for, say, having a group of kids who come in way behind. We're going to look at how much progress they make once they're here. Same thing with Jing's study on attendance, right? We're not going to penalize you if you have a lot of low-income kids who are not showing up for school, per se. What we're going to focus on is, okay, we know that those kids missed a lot of school in elementary school, and now that they're in middle school, how does the middle school do in getting them to come to school and to show up, right? And holding for other things as well. So trying to focus on what schools have within their control. All right. Now we get to grades, right? And again, people's initial reaction to this, their head's going to explode. They're going to say, well, grades are too much under schools' control, right? Wait, we're going to measure schools based on their kids' grades? Doesn't that just encourage them to give everybody an A? So here's the key, right? We're not measuring a school based on their own kids' grades. We're measuring a school based on how their kids do once they get to their next school, right? So I love this for elementary schools. I live in a place in Montgomery County where we have 5 elementary schools that come together into one middle school. They're all affluent. They all get high ratings from the states. But, I always wonder, like, are some of the other ways to measure the quality of those elementary schools? And one would be, hey, when those different kids get to middle school, do some of those elementary schools do a better job than other preparing them to be successful? And one way to measure that would be based on their 6th grade GPA, right? They've now left the elementary school. They're now on their own in this new environment. And maybe for some reasons, kids from some elementary schools do better than others when measured by their grades. Can we also, of course, we have to worry about, there still could be demographic selection effects. There still could be, so we've got to apply some magic to be able to make this fair. Okay, so did I get that okay? Did I say that all right? One of the main things we're going to talk about is how the heck to talk about this idea because it gets so complicated. But maybe you, Seth, can tell us. So what is the magic inside the box that's going to allow us to make fair comparisons of, say, the elementary schools in my neighborhood or middle schools sending kids to, different middle schools sending kids to the same high school?
Yeah, so I think you said I think the magic word or the magic way to explain this is that it's just the idea of growth. And we want to understand are certain schools generating more growth from whatever baseline their students were at. And I think one of the innovations of our study is that we've already been doing that with test scores and growth metrics for test scores for a long time. We're going to apply a similar concept like Jing did to absences or in this study to grades. And so at a very basic level, we want to sort of get a sense of, okay, where is a student at today where are they at next year? And are the kids who graduated from a certain elementary school, are they making bigger gains from year to year, even starting at the same point, than kids from another elementary school?
Mm-hmm.
And again, we can do that with test scores in a pretty straightforward way, and we've been doing that for a while. We can do that with absences or measures of chronic absenteeism, and we've been doing that for a little bit. So in one sense, doing that with grades is a natural extension. But like you said, grades are different in a way that they are by definition assigned by schools and assigned by teachers. And so we don't gain we don't see the benefits of like state standardized tests where everyone takes the same test. Now we have individual schools assigning grades. And so that's exactly why, like you said, we want to look at your grades in the next school. And everybody changes schools at the end of elementary school. And so we have this sort of natural point in time or point in a student's career to look at the 5th to 6th grade transition or the 8th to 9th grade transition, if we want to do this for middle to high school. And now, I guess the other piece of the magic is to say, all right, within a given middle school, there's kids from a bunch of different elementary schools. Within a given high school, there's kids from a bunch of different middle schools. And so, yes, we want to look at growth in the same way we've always looked at growth. So, hold your baseline score in 5th grade constant. How much do you gain in 6th grade? But now we're going to make a second correction and look only within a particular middle school and compare the kids within that middle school who attended elementary school A to another group of kids in the same middle school who attended elementary school B. So a lot like value added or growth metrics for teachers, we're going to apply this concept to schools, focus on the special grades of grades 5 and grade 6 where we see a change in schools and say, all right, are the kids in, Center Valley Middle School who went to Wilson Elementary, are they doing systematically better from kids than kids from Bethel Elementary in that same middle school who had the same demographic background, who have the same socioeconomic background, who had the same test scores in 5th grade? Right? In other words, these are basically very, very similar kids on all these different dimensions. But they differ in one way. They attended different elementary schools.
Yeah. So this is why
their graphics are the same. Their test scores are the same. They end up in the same middle school. They're the same kids.
Yeah.
They're different in one way. They went to different elementary schools.
Right. And even if their teachers had different grading standards, which we know they did, right? I mean, this is the thing. We know that teachers make it up in terms of how they decide, what's going to count, how much is going to count. Do you have to turn in your assignment on time? Do you get penalized for late work? Do you, there might be district policies around this. Policies might have changed. Despite all of that, you're able to work this magic and learn from it. And when you do all of that, because the math goes way, way over my head, what do we find out? Well, we've got a measure that looks like it's stable and valid and reliable over time, that it looks, it doesn't move around in weird ways. And it's different than test score value added. Okay, now Jing, help us understand what that means. So I think what you're saying is that once you apply all these controls, and they do include test scores as part of the controls, you can come up with these measures of what we call it maybe GPA value added, right? That might show that an elementary school that's really good at helping their graduates do well in 6th grade, once they get to middle school, those are a different set of middle schools than elementary schools that are crushing it in terms of test score growth.
Exactly. So I think this is consistent with what we know about GPA as a pretty distinct measure that captures a wide range of student skills and capacities beyond test scores. So there were earlier studies showing that even conditional on test scores, GPA is very, very predictive, and even more predictive than test scores in terms of student high school graduation and even college attendance. So here it just shows that schools that are very good at improving student future GPA are pretty different from schools that are very good at raising student test scores. It's capturing a very distinct aspect of school quality.
Yeah. And this is where my first reaction when I saw this was, uh-oh. It made me nervous. David, remember having this conversation. I was like, oh God, I mean, we're big in on test score value added growth. We celebrate these schools. Let's say maybe they might be high quality charter schools that are crushing it on test score growth, but they're not necessarily helping their kids do well once they get to middle school or once they get to high school. Like, that doesn't seem good. So how do you think about that? Is this damning for test scores, or do you read it a different way?
Yeah, I do read it a different way. Let me hit you with one of my famous sports analogies.
Excellent.
If you take the players in the NBA and you rank them by points scored per game, right? You will see a lot of familiar names at the top of the list, right? You will get many of the best players in the NBA at the top of that list if you use that single metric. But you will not necessarily get the best player in the NBA coming out number one, right? The highest scoring player in the NBA is probably a really good basketball player, right? But they are not necessarily the best basketball player on planet Earth. And perhaps more importantly, for purposes of school accountability, there are players in the NBA, right, who don't score a lot, who contribute in other ways, right? So the famous example is like Shane Battier. I know I'm nerding out on basketball here, right? But he was like the non-scoring superstar, right?
You're also dating yourself.
Yes, I'm dating myself, right? But there was a great article about him, right, back in the day. I forget, was it the New York Times or I forget. Basically, the guy would step on the court, right, and good things would just sort of happen, even though he didn't score very much. And so I think that's the sort of analogy that I would make is, yeah, test-based accountability, in my view, is good overall. But that does not mean it is ideal. It does not mean we cannot do better. And I think we're all coming to this conversation from different places, right? And the place I'm coming to it from is a place of frustration, right? Because it often feels like you have to choose between being for test-based accountability and sort of being in this super hardcore test-based accountability camp, right? Or being against it and being against all forms of accountability. And both of those are kind of silly positions, honestly, when really we have it within our power to evaluate schools rigorously and more holistically if we just kind of, reach our hands out and try to touch the people on the other side of the aisle. So that's where I'm coming from. I feel like this is a rigorous, useful idea, and I don't think it discredits test-based accountability at all. I think it enhances it.
Mm-hmm. So Jing did a part of the study in Maryland. Seth did a part that was in North Carolina. So let's talk about Maryland for a moment, my home state, where my kids go to school. So
I didn't realize we are actually neighbors.
Yes, we're neighbors. Excellent. Good. I thought I could hear you. Yes, through the wall. We have is it A-F? No, five-star rating system in Maryland, which is, hey, impressive for a blue state to have that. It's pretty good. It's, got some focus on proficiency, on growth, on absenteeism, a few other things. I think what we're saying here is we can make it a little bit even better is what if you could add some measures around middle school success for the elementary schools or high school success for the middle schools, right? If you could maybe use Jing's method for chronic absenteeism value added instead of in addition to the raw numbers, right? So we've got an accountability system that's pretty good. We could make it even better. And if you could communicate it to educators, you'd be saying, hey, what we're doing here is we're trying to hold you accountable for a couple of different things. One is helping your kids make progress, reading and math, absolutely, but also for preparing your graduates to go on and succeed in school at their next school, as well as to go on and attend school, show up for class, make a change. So then you start to change those incentives and dynamics. So instead of just test prep, for example, then suddenly they can ask themselves, what might we actually do to make it likelier that kids go and are successful in 6th grade or in 9th grade? Does that sound right, Jing?
Exactly. So in the attendance evaluated paper we did a few years ago, what's really nice is we also had measures on school climate. So we see that certain types of school climate were really beneficial in terms of improving schools' attendance value added. Unfortunately, we don't have that kind of measure for Maryland for this particular study, but I think you really pointed out that with a different measure like this, it's really important to ask what schools do really benefit students for their future grade, for their performance in the next school. So that's exactly the question we should ask with some like a numeric like this.
Yeah, and that could be the next study, right? Is to say, let's look at some of these places. Maybe that's the place to start before putting it into an accountability system. Maybe you say, and I've heard Seth mention this, let's celebrate the top 10% of schools for GPA value added. The elementary schools whose kids really do well at middle school, the middle schools whose kids really do well at high school. Let's just identify them. These schools probably have no idea, right? And then we can start to try to figure out some rigorous ways to figure out what are they doing that seems to be working. We've seen this at the teacher level with some studies by Carol Jackson and others, that some teachers are really good at boosting the future grades and things of kids. Now we're going to find out that some schools are. And I don't know. I mean, David, do you have hypotheses? I mean, you've been in schools. Like, what are they doing that might be working? Do we have any idea? Do you think they have any idea?
As someone who's been in schools, right?
More recently than the rest of us.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that at this point. Listen, I think part of what's appealing about this to me, honestly, is that there are many possibilities, right? It's so hard to sort of say what the secret sauce is of a really rigorous, stellar elementary school. My guess is it has something to do with a really rigorous, stellar principal as sort of a starting point, right? Like leadership is just this like fantastically difficult to pin down thing that we all know matters, right? And so it also probably has fantastic teachers who challenge their students, right? Yeah, I mean, I guess I just want to triple down on the notion that, what I find so appealing about this idea is that we are incentivizing schools to think about tomorrow. Not literally tomorrow, not test day, right? But next year, a year or two down the road. And that is something that we haven't done basically ever in the education system. We have been obsessed with short-termism. And I just think that no single indicator is going to fully capture what a school can do. But I think there is something really appealing to me personally about the idea of incentivizing schools to ask themselves, what would they do differently, right? Or what would they do more of if they wanted their kids to succeed next year, right? After they left. It's such a powerful idea to me. And I think if we start with that question, instead of asking, exactly whether this is 1000% unbiased, because no evaluation system is perfectly unbiased. I think that's just such a healthy place for the conversation to start. And that's what I hope people think about.
All right, we will leave it there on that very positive note. Thank you, David. And thank you, Seth Gershenson and Jing Liu. Again, check out their study. Let me make sure I say it right. Ready or Not, a New Way to Measure Elementary and Middle School Quality. Seth at American University, Jing at the University of Maryland. Did I get that right for both of you? Good. Hey, appreciate all the great work, and thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Now it's time for everyone's favorite, Amber's Research Minute. Amber, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Mike.
So, Academy Awards, did you watch? Did you care? I
You
mean,
know that I missed it last night because I was watching something else.
oh, well, there you go. You have so many things on your to watch list.
But of course, I did check it this morning to see, who won and what
Mhm.
dresses the stars wore, all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, I was watching Carry On, which is a great movie. If you haven't seen it, old Jason Bateman is really really good in Carry On. If anybody's
Okay.
looking for a movie on Netflix.
That sounds good because I would that sounds like better than taking the advice of the Academy Award people because we did try one, I think it was one movie, The Substance with Demi Moore,
Yeah.
and oh my God, it was unwatchable. So I mean, made a heck of a statement
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, there needs to be like an award show for like, and now for movies you might want to actually watch.
Yes, I understand. Yeah, I haven't heard of or seen most of the ones that were nominated. So,
Yep. Yep. Well, there you go. There you go. But this is a podcast that people want to watch, they want to listen to. It has been fun. It's been conference season, and I get to run into a bunch of y'all out there, out and about, and it's fun. I even got to do a selfie the other day with some longtime listeners of the podcast, so that was exciting. So
nice.
yeah, yeah.
That's
I'm always happy to do.
One selfie in 10 years.
I'm up this. We've been doing it 20 years, and we were up to one selfie. So.
Oh, man.
All right, Amber. Well, tell us what you got for us on the education research front today.
What we always like on the RM is a good old-fashioned quiz. And we are having one today. Put your quiz
make it
pants
work.
on.
All right.
We have a nationally representative survey called Media Use by Kids 0 to 8. We've got some results from over 1,500 parents of children age 8 or younger. Again, nationally representative, conducted from August 5th to August 29th in 2024. So here we're relying on parents' reports of how often their kids are on their phones or other devices and, looking at media. So the survey is conducted by Common Sense. I did not know who they were, but their mission is to improve the lives of kids and families by providing them with trustworthy information and the independent voice they need to thrive. So anyhow,
it's a great website. Come on, Amber. You hadn't seen this before. It's great. Yeah, to try to figure out, like, back when we used to try to make any effort to shield my boys from inappropriate content. Yes, we would check the common. The
Common Sense. Okay.
Common Sense.
This is what I get for not having children. But anyway, so glad it's got a good reputation. Findings are presented for the full survey sample of children age 0 to 8 and for 3 subgroups, birth to 2, 2 to 4, and 5 to 8. All right. Number 1, here goes your quiz. Approximately how much time do children age 8 and under spend on screens per day?
6 hours.
David?
Per day?
Per day.
I'm already depressed. I'm going to go with 4 hours.
All right. Well, you guys are a little bit too cynical. It's 2.5 hours.
Okay.
Wait.
But again,
no. What do you call it when somebody's lying on a survey?
the halo effect. Yeah.
The halo effect.
So the breakdown under 2, it's an hour. 2 to 4, it's over 2 hours, and 5 to 8, it's 3.5. So when you get to 5 and 8, you do start creeping up to 4 hours. Okay. In terms of activities, parents of age birth to 8 kids say their kids spend 60% of their screen time doing what?
Watching YouTube.
David?
Games.
Watching TV or videos. So Mike's got that one.
All right.
Of which more than a third are streaming that content. 26% of time, parents say they're gaming. 4% of time, parents say they're reading. And 1% of time, they say they're spending on homework. 1%. Social networking and video chatting are also small percentages. Among the majority of children who watch these online videos, 65% of parents say their children often or sometimes watch learning videos. that teach specific concepts like numbers or shapes. So again, I don't know. Maybe they're being a little optimistic there. Boys spend how much time more on screens each day than girls?
Let's say an hour.
Yeah, that's interesting. 30 minutes.
30 minutes, that's right. They're spending more time watching TV and videos and playing video games. Children from households earning less than $50,000 per year spend twice as much time on screen media as those from households earning $100,000 or more per year. The total average time spent gaming has increased what percentage in the last 4 years?
50%.
Like
75.
65%.
Hmm.
In 2020, children spent 23 minutes of total time per day playing video games across all different devices. That's now 38 minutes in 2024, which is a 65% increase in average time spent playing games. By 2 years old, how many children have their own tablet? By 2.
Now, this is unfair because we may have seen this in some of the alarming articles about this study.
All right. So,
It's just going to say 56%.
No, I think it was 40%.
It was 40%. Good memory.
Mhm.
Did you read, Mike, what the percentage was at 4 years old?
I did not.
All right. 4 years old, it's 58. By age 8, it's 68 have their own tablets. By 8 years old, how many kids have their own cell phones, which are incidentally smartphones for the most part?
This I did not see. Wow, 8. Gosh, that is early.
8.
I don't know, 30%.
I'll go with 40.
25, Mike.
Mhm.
Number 5, what percentage of children age 0 to 8 have watched bite-sized videos not designed for children on platforms like TikTok, YouTube Shorts, or Instagram Reels?
100%.
David, it's not that.
Well, I mean, I'm wondering about like these data. How do we know this? But okay.
Parents.
Parents. Okay. According to parents, I don't
Yes.
know. 40%.
About half. So
Okay.
you're close there. At the same time, at the same time, almost 80%, I'm just telling you this one, of parents express consistent concerns about screen media, including worries about excessive use, effects on their child's mental health, and the amount of inappropriate content. So they're all worried about it, about 80%. But anyway, there's that. Number 7, there was a mixed bag with reading relative to a child's age. The percentage of parents who report that their child reads or is read to daily has increased since 2020 by nearly 10 percentage points for parents of children younger than 2. So it's gone from 46 to 55%, which is great. But it's decreased by the same proportion for older kids. So they went from 63 to 52% for the age 5 to 8. I didn't quiz you on that because there was a lot in there. But the bottom line is the older kids are getting read to less often. About 1 in 5 kids use devices, according to their parents, for comfort at mealtime or to fall asleep. More specifically, and this is interesting, parents say that they let their kids use tablets or other screens for the following reasons. What percentage say they let their kids use screen media at least sometimes to occupy their child so they can get things done or take time for themselves?
100%.
That is the real number.
That is the real number.
I will go with 75%.
66%.
Well,
56 say they use it to bond with or relax together with their child. 47% say they use it to reward good behavior. 44% to keep their child occupied when in public at the doctor's office, grocery store, or a restaurant. And finally, your last question, what percentage say they use it to help their child calm down when their child is angry or upset?
Interesting. 25%.
35.
25 is correct.
Mhm.
Nice job, Mike. So that's what I've got. And I know you guys must have reactions to all of that.
Yeah, they didn't say the reason the kid's upset is because you just took their iPad away. And
Yeah.
oh my goodness, we we kind of caught the very early end of this. The iPhone came out in 2007. I think I had one by maybe 2009 or 10. My kids were born in 2007 and 2010. We certainly had an iPad in the house when Leandro was a little guy. God, I mean, it is so tempting to use it as a babysitter. There is no doubt about it. And sometimes when I read the stuff by the folks that are pushing hard to get rid of phones, which I think is look, it's a huge problem. We have got to figure this out as a society. But I also have empathy for the parents and fellow parents. I mean, it's amazing as a tool when you're on the plane, right? Or when there really is some kind of emergency, or you're multitasking and there's and you can find good stuff and good material. But man, then it just gets to be a crutch. And then you can imagine these kids getting raised on screens and all the terrible things that means. And of course, low income kids more so, because it costs money to try to, what can you do? If you're wealthy, you can hire a babysitter, a kid down the street, and say, okay, no screens. You guys go out and play in the street, or send them to a summer camp where they take the phones and they don't allow, you can do these things to make these screen-free zones. When you don't have those kinds of resources, it's hard. It's really, really hard. I don't know, David. I mean, you're fired up about this stuff.
I am fired up about this stuff, Mike. Believe it or not, people made it through dentist appointments and plane rides and so forth before any of this stuff was invented, right? I have small children. I know what I'm talking about, right? I understand that it is really difficult in some circumstances. And I think what makes the conversation difficult, right, is that a little bit is okay, right? Sometimes mom needs a break, right? It's been 4 hours and it's time for someone to just take a break, take half an hour, reset, so you can be a better parent after the show or, the video game time is over. But it is such a slippery slope. And, I guess I just feel like it just doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't pass the smell test for me when people tell me, oh, well, I can't do this, right, without this, right? People have been raising children for millennia without these tools. Not always well, but I don't know. We need sort of a national campaign against excessive screen time. It needed to start a decade ago. I taught a decade ago, and it was a problem. Phones were a problem then, and it took us the better part of a decade to start banning them in schools, in classrooms, right? So part of the reason that I am fired up about this is because I feel like we have been extremely slow to get going here. Right. And that's understandable. It takes time to build a consensus, but we cannot allow another decade to pass before we start saying, 6-7 hours of screen time a day for a 3-year-old is too much. Right. We can't wait for some randomized control trial to tell us something that any idiot knows. So, yeah, I am getting a little bit out in front of the evidence here. Right. I recognize that a lot of it is correlational. It is common sense, right? It is common sense that if you let your kid stare at a screen all day, even if it's educational nominally, and look, some of this stuff is educational, and that is probably better than non-educational content, but it is still a fundamentally passive exercise in many cases. It is still not eye contact, and it is still not developing an adult attention span, as though there is such a thing anymore. So I just think we cannot be aggressive enough about this. And I think we need to have a national conversation about it.
Yep. Look, I think that sounds right. It is a hard one to solve. And you mentioned in one of our email threads, it's like, it's got to become like handing a cigarette to a toddler.
Yeah, I was fired up. But I do think excessive screen time is almost that bad, right? Mm-hmm. I am tired of hearing stories of young kids who have some sort of developmental problem or speech delay. And it's like, well, okay, so why do you think that happened? Oh, well, he's on screens all the time. Well, mm-hmm. Of course, of course there's a problem.
I'm going to give you a quick anecdote. I have a cleaning lady that's been with me for years. She's a single mom. And she was telling me at 2 and 3 that her son was always, she bought him a little piano, a little, whatever you call them for kids. Mm-hmm. And he was tapping away on it. She was talking about how much he was into music. This has been a couple years ago. And this time she came back and I asked her and she said, he doesn't play so much anymore. He's really into his tablet. And she said, and I feel so terrible because when I go home, I'm exhausted. And if he doesn't have the tablet, he wants me to play with him. And I'm just so tired. So I was like, wow, she knows it. So anyway, it was sad for me, both that she, recognized it and also for that child who lost an interest in music when he presumably had one early.
No, that is hard. Thanks for sharing that, Amber. I mean, and look, this is a big change in parenting. It used to be not that the mom was necessarily expected to play with the kid, right? It was that go play with your siblings, or there was a grandparent in the house, or go out on the street and play with the kids. Well, what if the street's not safe? So, some of this intersects with these larger changes that, where we've made it became a verb and we've made it harder. This is something we got to keep at, people. There's got to be, this is, David's right. It's like we're just watching this generation ingest lead or something that we know is bad for their brain, and we're not doing enough about it. All right. But that is all the time we've got to rant about that for this week. So thank you, Amber. Until next week.
I'm David Griffith.
And I'm Mike Petrilli of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, signing off.
The Education Gadfly Show is a production of the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, located in Washington, D.C. For more information, visit us online at fordhaminstitute.org.